And I don't care if you're a client or a child of a client or we've never met before. If I could take 20 minutes and just maybe give you some encouragement as to maybe not solve everything, but at least make you aware of what the priorities are.
All right, welcome to the F Words podcast. My name is Nic Skovgaard. I have John Forbes with me today, and we're talking about uncertainty. John, right now there's a lot of things shifting around in the world. What do you tell people who are laying awake at night in bed, tonight, worried about what's going on in the world?
Yeah, the first thing, Nick, I tell them is we planned for this. With every portfolio when we put it together, one of the key things we look at is what if? What if the market does great? What if the market does poorly? What if I need money at the wrong time? And it's been a great opportunity to go back and revisit with clients that do express concerns and say, we've planned for this. We've got money that's not in the stock market, that if you needed something to supplement your income or you needed a chunk of money for something, we've got it. We've got it covered. We've got a plan. Let's not let short-term events wreck our long-term forecasts.
I feel like the headlines panic people, but there's a reason for that. I mean, headlines are literally designed to trigger that fear and urgency. That's what keeps you watching the channel, right?
Exactly. I always like to share with people, if you're walking up to an elevator and the two buttons said plunge or soar, you take the stairs. You wouldn't even get on the elevator. But that's what the media, as noble and as sweet as it would be to think that the media is truly there to educate us and help us make better decisions. That's not what they're there for. They're there to sell ads. They're there to get clicks. They're there to get eyeballs and to keep you dependent on them for understanding what's going on in the world and what do we need to do about it. And more often than not, they will tend to use extremes. They'll use fear and greed to try to keep your attention. So some of the best advice I give clients is I instruct them to take a 30-day news fast, that just to unplug, because much of the information they're getting isn't going to make their lives better. It's not going to lower their blood pressure. It's going to increase it. So if you can disconnect and see how you feel and see if it feels like, I'm actually spending more time talking with my wife. I'm spending more time playing with my grandkids. I'm spending more time with the flower garden outside, and see what that does for your mental health as well as your physical health. I think you'd be amazed.
Yeah, market doing okay isn't exactly the headline of the week, right?
Yeah. When the red banner says market fluctuates, that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't sell anything. It's the truth, but it doesn't sell soap or soda or pharmaceutical goods for sure.
The funny thing is, I feel like we all, deep down, we all know this, right? I mean, when you look at the bar, it does this, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a straight line. It's not perfectly, level. It changes. And I feel like there's a big difference between, motion and emotion in investing. And I think that's something you talk about a lot, is it's here sometimes that can get us the worst.
Yeah, it is. We are, as humans, we are wired with a fight or flight response to anything. And we feel like we have to do something every time something doesn't go our way. And oftentimes the answer isn't do something, it's be still. Be still and know I've got a plan. Markets do what markets do. I'm not going to let the emotion of the moment take a temporary decline and make it permanent.
And John, I'm sure this will not surprise you, but there's lots of experts on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook or whatever who are telling you, how to pull your money out and do this and time the market like this. And I think that you have this wonderful, wonderful saying. I'm going to let you say it because I'm not going to get it right. Mm-hmm. But it's not. It's not about timing the market, right?
Yeah, it's and actually, I wish it were my saying. It was far wiser than I. But the saying is it's not timing the market; it's time in the market. If we know that looking back over the last 70, 80, 90 years, the market has consistently averaged just right around 10%, a little bit less than that. When we talk about the market, we're talking about the S&P 500. If we would be pretty happy doubling our equity money every 7 years, then the cost of admission to get that performance is understanding and tolerating and not overreacting to negative swings in the market. And that's where if you can get out, and if you get out and just miss one or two or even three really good days a year, it literally takes that 10% number and in no time drives it down to 4 or 5, 6% return if you miss just a handful of good days in a particular year.
And so we talk a little bit about, having that plan. That plan is so important. Like when somebody's panicking, you remind them there's a plan in space. Why do you plan for things like this? Why are you expecting volatility? Why isn't it always sunshine and roses?
Well, it can be geopolitical. It can be economic. There are so many things that can rattle a market temporarily, and I cannot stress enough temporarily. When you're going through it, again, human nature is to say, okay, here's what I had 3 months ago on my statement. Here's what I have now. At this rate, I'm going to be broke in 5 years. And the mind starts to play tricks and starts to create this almost demand this action, do something. And markets don't do that. And what's amazing, and Nick, I don't want to get too far in the weeds. It's kind of boring, but I get wonky sometimes. When we look, I tell you about this roughly 10% a year return over time in the market. I've gone back and looked and said, okay, how many times have we had a normal return? And if it's averaged 10% a year over the last 90 years, 70 plus years for sure, if it's averaged about 10%, how many times have we had a normal return, which would be a calendar year between, I defined it as somewhere between 8 and 12%. I thought, okay, that's kind of a good window. In over 70 years, it's happened 5 times that we've had a return in that window. So, okay, let's redefine it. Then let's call normal, instead of 8 to 12, let's say 6 to 14%. That's a pretty wide window. That's only happened 11 times. So basically, 7 out of every 8 years, the market's either up over 14%, up 0 to 6, or it's negative. Well, you don't get a 10% return by having lots of 0 to 6s and negatives, which means that there's got to be a lot of 14+% returns. And when we think things look bleak, when everything we're seeing is red and everything we're hearing is panic, that temptation to get out usually happens right before the market takes a big turn back in the right direction. And if we're armed and equipped with that kind of knowledge, we can help keep emotions at bay and make sure that we're staying with the plan. We're staying with what we know. We know the market's going to be inconsistent, but we know that over time it's awfully hard to beat it.
We talk a little bit about like having an anchor to your portfolio, the why behind what you're doing. Mm-hmm. How does that kind of help someone, make good decisions or guide their decisions to be, let's say, a little bit more rational?
Yeah, well, it all, boy, I sound like a broken record. It all goes back to the initial meeting and the plan and what's the strategy going to be that you're going to use. If you're out just swinging away at everything, trying to find the best return you can get, the odds are you're probably taking on more risk than you should. And we can't control returns, but we can absolutely control risk. So that's what when you sit down initially and you're investing by yourself, or if you're using an advisor, you've got to have a plan in place that takes into account, what do I need to accomplish? What do I want to accomplish? And how can I do that without taking on a lot of unnecessary risk? And that's what helps to define the success. Not did you beat the market this year or this quarter or this week, or it's am I on track? Am I on track for the retirement that my wife and I want to have? Am I on track for getting that dream, that boat, that pontoon boat? Around here, the dream boats are the nice pontoons that you can get out and enjoy at Cedar Lake or enjoy at a local lake. Am I on track for being able to celebrate my retirement with getting that that 73 Corvette that I've always wanted. These are the things that we need to keep at the forefront of why we're investing, why we do it. It's not to see who can have the most commas or who can have the most money in their statements. It's who can maximize joy, who can absolutely keep the right context and perspective on why we're investing and what the outcome is we're wanting to achieve.
I like that a lot. Do you kind of walk people through any ways that they can think about, what does that really look like for them? Is there some exercise where I sit down with a pen and paper and figure out like what actually matters, the 78 Corvette or whatever it is? Is there anything that you kind of walk your clients through, or advice that you could share today?
Yeah, well, one of the questions I love to get into with our clients is, how are we going to define success 10 years from now? Or if it's younger clients, how are we going to define success 25 years from now? When you look back, what do you hope to have accomplished? And I'm not talking about how many years you beat the index or what your returns were. What will a content, satisfied, happy life look like as you're looking back 10 years from now? And then how can we take the tools of financial management and shave and sculpt and create something that will effectively aim us toward that goal?
We were kind of getting ready for this. We talked about kind of like, peace being the real wealth. What is that emotional toll of constantly watching the market or being, overly obsessed with it? What kind of toll does that take on somebody?
Yeah, that insecurity or that lack of confidence in why we're doing what we're doing can stir so much anxiety, and it creates. And honestly, many times when I'm having conversations with clients, we have a two-track conversation. One is, I'll say, okay, as a financial advisor, I can tell you financially what statistically is the best outcome. As your friend and somebody who's known you for a while, here's where this may not be the most financially efficient solution, but it's the one that I know you're going to sleep well at night. And we balance those two things. And there are many clients who, it might be paying off a mortgage on their home that's at a fairly decent rate. We could probably make a strong financial argument why that money needs to be invested in the market, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, if it's something where, my parents never had a house paid off, or whatever their story might be, that owning their home free and clear is something that will bring them such peace. Okay, maybe we do it, or maybe we meet in the middle and put a little toward investing and knock a chunk off of the debt, with the idea of knowing we can get this thing paid off in 4 years instead of 14.
Yeah. I like that a lot of our F words on this podcast can kind of, are the things that build sort of that stability when watching the market is not making you very happy. Faith, family, the purpose that you have. Will you kind of talk about like how those things came to be, core principles, and how people can, kind of rely or lean back on those?
Sure. And folks that I know well enough will have this conversation. I'll tell you, when I go to your funeral, I'll write a check and stick it in the coffin for however much your account value was. We realize that you literally can't take it with you. So what's the legacy that you want to leave? And we get into those legacy conversations about involving maybe their kids, their grandkids, making sure that their husband or wife doesn't have to worry about money when they're gone. Those are, we like to call them the true riches. That's what we want to focus our time and our conversations and our effort on making. If we win, that's what we want to win. We don't want to win who took their last breath with the most money. We want to know who took their last breath and can die and leave knowing they've left a legacy that they never dreamed of.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Do you have any stories? And I know that you can't talk about individual people, but any stories of clients that really were able to focus on that meaning and like stop over obsessing with the financial side of things?
Nick, I've got several clients who have said, John, I'm going to leave it to you. I trust you, that is such an honor, and it's not something that any financial advisor ever takes for granted. I mean, that is such an honor and a thrill to serve a family in that way. And we still have all the conversations. We still go through all of the analysis and the review and all of those things that every good advisor should do. But if I can get somebody to shift the prism a little bit and look through a different lens, and not purely financial, but a true riches kind of lens, a legacy kind of lens. What is really, really important? And let's nail that down and make sure that we're spending our time and our attention and our conversations on, keeping me aware of how those things might change, so that I can shift the levers and do the things that need to be done to accommodate those kinds of changes and make sure that we stay on track for. Not necessarily for winning the financial race, but just winning life's race.
So, John, I'd like to ask you to do something kind of a little unorthodox today. If you're game for something a little unique, I feel like there's a lot of people that can use some John wisdom right now. As they're worried about something. Would you take a moment to just look in the camera and just give us the same conversation that you have with your clients when they come in and they're panicked or they're overwhelmed or they're worried. I'd really like you to open that up if you wouldn't mind, because I think there's a lot of people who could use a pep talk.
Sure. Well, I tell you what, the pep talks, the pep talks do change depending on what season of life that you're in. For my pep talks for the 20 and 30 and 40-year-old crowd is, it's not too late. Don't worry. Don't beat yourself up over woulda, coulda, shoulda. So many people are so defeated about their finances, and in many instances, it took a decade or more to get in the bind you're in. We're not going to fix it overnight. It's going to take a little bit of time. I had a great conversation with a son of one of my clients just yesterday. And he knew he needed to talk to a financial advisor, but he'd been kind of reluctant to do it because he didn't want to open up and share kind of where he's at. And I let him know up front, there's no, you've already won because you called. You're already way ahead of most people. Most people, they start to dig a hole. They know they're digging a hole, but they don't quite know how to get out of it, and they're too afraid to ask. And we had just a great conversation, and this is not uncommon. The plan, because he called with the idea of he wanted to start investing, and we got about 15 minutes into the conversation. And I told him, the way I can serve you best isn't through investing right now. There are some other things that we can do that will have so much more benefit for you financially, for you, for your wife, for your kids. And we kind of laid out in a matter of about 30 minutes, we laid out a 3-year plan where year one was, we are going to crush any of that outstanding unsecured debt, the credit card debt, the stuff like that. We're going to put together a plan to knock that out. And then once that's knocked out, since you're committing financially to a certain amount every month to do that, we're then going to roll that into paying yourself and building up that savings account and that checking account. So in year one, you're out of debt. Year two, you've got a $10,000 or $15,000 safety net behind you, so that when you blow a tire because you hit a curb and you've got to replace $500, $800, $1,000 worth of tires, it doesn't go on the plastic. It comes out of the savings that you accumulated because you had a plan. You planned for that. And then year three is, okay, now we've got the debt paid off. We've got some savings in place. Now we're going to really crank up the retirement savings and supplement it with a Roth IRA. And because you become so disciplined over the first 2 years, now you've got the discipline to tackle investing. And when life throws you a curve, you're not cashing out of a portfolio at the wrong time. You've built a bucket for that. You plan for that. And when folks these days have credit cards with 20 and 29% interest rates, I can't, as much as I would like to say I can guarantee you a 29% return, I can't. But every dollar you apply toward that credit card is a reduction of 29% interest. And that is, rather than looking at that as a defeat that I can't start investing yet, that's a win, because if you look at your personal balance sheet, your personal financial, if you eliminate that debt, your balance sheet is just as strong, if not stronger, than if you'd taken that money and built up some investments, because reducing liabilities is a win on the balance sheet just as much as building up assets.
That is the type of like refreshing advice that people need. Like they just need that like, it's okay. Right. Mm-hmm. Because I think that everyone, I remember in my 20s, I remember in my 30s, I remember now in my 40s, that I look at that and go like, I'm so far behind. It's embarrassing to like, I haven't hit my goals. I'm not a multimillionaire yet. Right. And I think that we get sort of obsessed with that. As sort of our call to action today, the thing that we ask somebody to do in the next 7 days, other than turning off the news and maybe not drowning in whatever's going on the news channel today, mm-hmm. what would you ask people to do who have some of that anxiety or that worry when it comes to money and finances?
Seek advice. And if you've got someone, or you've got a friend or a family member that has somebody, seek advice. And Nick, I've said this for a long time. I've got a 20-minute Ask Me Anything. You can reach out to our office and we can schedule 20 minutes. And I don't care if you're a client or a child of a client or we've never met before. If I could take 20 minutes and just maybe give you some encouragement as to maybe not solve everything, but at least make you aware of what the priorities are. As I was sharing with this son of a client yesterday, if I'm walking past your house, you might need to weed your garden, but if you've got a grease fire in the kitchen, I'm going to go up and throw a rock through the window. I'm going to do everything I can to get your attention to take care of the grease fire first. We'll get to the flower garden later, but if I can help people identify, and usually we can do that pretty quick, identify what the grease fire is. What's the thing that we've got to commit all hands on ship to extinguish this, to take care of this problem, and then provide some potential guidance for maybe they need to talk to a CPA, maybe they need to talk to a credit counselor, maybe there could be any number of people. It more often than not, the first visit, it may not involve me. There may be, and probably are, some grease fires that need to be put out before we can start talking about things at a different level. But yeah, I would say don't swallow your pride and seek some advice. Find somebody that you can trust, that can give you a little encouragement on where to go, because no matter where you're at financially, your attitude will define the outcome that you will have 5 years from now. If your attitude is, man, this is tough, I never thought I'd be here, but we're going to change, we're going to do something about this, odds are you're going to accomplish that. If you stay in the dark and you don't seek out that advice or encouragement, that snowball is just going to get bigger. And I would really encourage you to not be afraid to seek advice from somebody that you know or trust.
John, that's fantastic. You have such a way with words. The grease fire and throwing a rock through the window is pretty fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I cannot tell you how many people are looking for that sort of just that lighthouse, just that something, when they're worried or when things get tumultuous, they're looking for that little extra reminder that things are going to be okay, and that they already probably know what they need to do. They just got to take the first step in the right direction.
Well, Nick, it's a pleasure, and again, with all the chaos in the world and all the craziness and the tribalism, the extremities, and everything, whether it's finance or politics or religion, just know that there is probably somewhere where you can take a nice slow inhale in, exhale out, and know that, okay, I know what my next steps are and what I need to do to accomplish them.
Oh, that's fantastic. John, thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick.
Security and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Individual tax or legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance reference is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal.